The muscle-bound alien Xander laughed, shoving Sergeant Jacob Walker with a force that sent him hurtling into the wall. His Wagner compatriots sneered, rolling up the sleeves of their skin-tight uniforms to show off oiled arms thick as Jacob's torso. Puny human, is this the best your Earth Defense Corps can offer? Pathetic. Jacob pulled himself to his feet, glaring up at the chiseled grey faces of the Wagner. He had landed on Xelos mere hours ago, eager to establish humanity's first base on the newly discovered world. Now it seemed that dream might be dashed before it began. The Wagner's reputation as the strongest warriors in the galaxy was apparently well earned. Their champion Xander had to duck his head to fit through the doorway of the Earth shuttlecraft. His biceps bulged and flexed as he gestured to the sleek training facility behind him. "We built this to test ourselves, to hone our bodies into weapons," Xander boasted. "Few species in the galaxy can face our challenges, and you think you humans can simply land here and claim part of Xelos?" He jabbed a finger into Jacob's chest, nearly knocking him down again. "Prove your strength, Earthling, if you dare. Beat our trials and perhaps we will allow your outpost to remain." Jacob straightened, meeting Xander's mocking gaze. He thought of the outpost, the prefab colony modules orbiting Xelos, awaiting the go-ahead to land and expand. Humanity's first toehold in this sector of space. So much was riding on this mission. He couldn't let a band of alien gym bros jeopardize that, no matter how intimidating they seemed. "I accept your challenge," Jacob declared. The Wagners laughed and hooted, slapping Xander on his broad, bare back. Jacob swallowed hard as he followed them toward the gleaming facility. He was humanity's champion now, like it or not. Earth was depending on him. Driven by his encounter with Xander and the other Wagners, Jacob delved into researching their society and culture. He spent hours poring over the Earth Defense Corps databases, trying to uncover the reason behind the Wagners' aggressive posturing. What he found shocked him. The records showed that the Wagner were once a peaceful race, living in harmony on Xelos. But then something called the Great Upheaval happened, a cataclysmic event that nearly wiped out their entire civilization. The few Wagners that survived were forced to become warriors in order to defend themselves against the harsh new reality of their planet. Jacob learned that Xelos was now a hostile world, filled with monstrous creatures that the Wagners had to fight off on a daily basis. The Wagners' incredible strength and combat prowess were a direct result of the challenges they faced just to stay alive. But as Jacob dug deeper, he uncovered an even more disturbing truth. The Wagners weren't the apex predators on Xelos. There was another race lurking in the shadows that was even more terrifying. They were called the Vortex, and they were intelligent, shape-shifting aliens with advanced technology. Jacob discovered that the Vortex had been secretly manipulating the Wagners, infiltrating their society and disguising themselves as high-ranking officials. They were using the Wagners as pawns in some kind of larger galactic scheme. Jacob's investigation didn't go unnoticed. He was contacted by a Wagner named Xalen, who had been secretly working to oppose the Vortex's influence on his people. In a clandestine meeting, Xalen revealed to Jacob that the Vortex were planning on using Xelos as a staging ground for an all-out invasion of Earth. Xalen introduced Jacob to a small rebel group of Wagners who had uncovered the Vortex's plot. They had learned that the Vortex were keeping the Wagners under control using some kind of advanced mind control technology. Together, Jacob and the rebels hatched a plan to infiltrate the Vortex's main base on Xelos and destroy the mind control device. They all knew it would be incredibly dangerous. The Vortex were immensely powerful and had technology beyond anything the rebels had faced before. But it was a risk they had to take. As they geared up and prepared for the mission, Jacob received an unexpected message from Xander, asking for a meeting. Jacob was hesitant, suspecting a trap, but he also hoped Xander might have valuable intel on the Vortex's plans. Against his better judgment, Jacob agreed to the meeting. To his surprise when they met, Xander admitted he was aware of the Vortex's manipulation. The champion warrior explained that he had only been playing along with the Vortex to keep his people safe. Xander looked Jacob in the eye and offered to help with the rebels' mission. But there was a condition. Jacob would have to prove that humans were strong enough to take on the vortex. Standing there, facing down this alien warrior, Jacob felt the weight of two worlds settling onto his shoulders. He realized that he wasn't just fighting for humanity anymore. He was fighting for the Wagniers too, to free them from the vortex's insidious control. Whatever challenges Xander had in store for him, Jacob would face them head-on. He had to, for the sake of both their people. Jacob clenched his fists, feeling a new sense of tenacity flowing through him. One way or another he would prove humanity's strength, and together with the Wagner rebels, he would put an end to the vortex's schemes, no matter what it took. The road ahead would be perilous, but Jacob was ready to face it. For Earth, for Zelos, for the future of both their races, intertwined by fate and united against a common enemy. The battle was only beginning. Jacob's pulse raced as he approached the meeting spot. The towering figure of Xander emerged from the shadows, his face etched with worry. "I didn't think you'd come," Xander said, his voice low and strained. "I'm here. What's this about?" Jacob asked, keeping his guard up. Xander's shoulders slumped. "The vortex have my mate and child. They're using them to control me." Jacob's eyes widened. "That's why you've been helping them?" Xander nodded grimly. "I have no choice, but I want to join your rebellion. If you can prove your worth." "How?" "A duel. If you win, I'll give you everything I know about the vortex plans." Jacob swallowed hard but nodded. "Lead the way." They descended into a hidden arena deep beneath the surface. The air was thick with dust and the smell of sweat. Jacob and Xander circled each other, muscles tensed. Xander struck first, his fist whistling past Jacob's ear. Jacob ducked and countered with a flurry of punches to Xander's midsection. The Wagner grunted, but barely flinched. Finally, Jacob saw an opening. He feinted left, then swept Xander's legs out from under him. The Wagner crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact. Jacob pounced, pinning him. "Hailed," Jacob gasped, every inch of him aching. Xander's eyes widened with newfound respect. "I yield." As promised, Xander spilled everything he knew. The rebels gathered to plan their next move. "We need to hit two targets," Jacob explained. "The mind control device and the prison holding Xander's family." They split into teams. Jacob would lead the assault on the Vortex base, while Xander headed the rescue mission. Using stolen shape-shifting tech, Jacob's team infiltrated the base. Inside, they found the mind control device, a massive, pulsating machine filling an entire chamber. It emitted a constant skin-crawling hum. Jacob's team worked quickly to plant explosives around its base. Meanwhile, Xander's team fought their way through the prison. Vortex guards shapeshifted into horrific beasts with razor-sharp claws and gnashing teeth. The sounds of battle echoed through the corridors. Back at the device, Jacob had just set the timer when a shout rang out. "Intruders!" Vortex soldiers poured into the room. Jacob and his team took cover, returning fire. The air filled with energy blasts and the acrid smell of ozone. In the prison, Xander finally reached the cell holding his family. He tore the door from its hinges, gathering his mate and child in his arms. But their path to freedom was blocked by a squad of elite Vortex warriors. The timer on the explosives ticked down. Jacob's team was pinned down, nearly overwhelmed. Just as all hope seemed lost, the charges detonated. A massive shockwave ripped through the base. The mind control device imploded, sending out a psychic pulse. All across Zelos, Wagniers began to shake off the mental fog that had controlled them for so long. In the confusion, Jacob and his team fled the crumbling base. They rendezvoused with Xander's group, battered but victorious. As the Wagner people rose up against their Vortex oppressors, Jacob knew this was only the beginning. He contacted Earth Defense Corps, requesting immediate reinforcements. The Vortex threat was far from finished, but now with the Wagniers as allies they had a fighting chance. Jacob and his team began preparations for the next phase of their mission. The real war was just beginning. The dust settled on Zelos, as the Wagniers shook off the mental shackles of vortex control. Jacob stood atop a ruined vortex outpost, surveying the carnage. Xander's booming voice rang out across the battlefield. "Brothers and sisters of Xelos, we are free at last. Now we must drive these shape-shifting parasites from our world." A thunderous roar erupted from the assembled Wagner warriors. Jacob couldn't help but grin at their newfound persistence. Over the next few days, Jacob's team worked tirelessly with Wagner scouts, piecing together intel on remaining vortex strongholds. They huddled around holographic maps, marking targets and planning assaults. "There," Zaylan said, pointing to a pulsing red dot deep in Xelos's volcanic region. "That's their main base. Our scouts report intense energy readings." Jacob leaned in, studying the hologram. "What kind of energy?" Xylan's face darkened. "The kind that can vaporize cities. The Vortex have a superweapon down there. If they activate it, our rebellion is finished." "Then we hit it first," Jacob declared. "Xander, gather your best warriors. We're going in." The strike force set out at dawn, trekking across treacherous lava fields. Sulphurous fumes stung their eyes as they picked their way between bubbling pools of molten rock. Suddenly, plasma bolts sizzled past Jacob's head. "Contact!" he yelled, diving for cover. Vortex guards swarmed from hidden bunkers, their forms twisting and warping as they attacked. Jacob's team returned fire, energy weapons lighting up the hazy air. Xander charged forward, smashing through the vortex line. His massive fists sent shapeshifters flying. "Push on!" he bellowed. "We cannot let them stop us." They fought their way through layers of defenses, disabling force fields and hacking security systems. Finally, they reached the heart of the complex, a cavernous chamber housing the Vortex superweapon. The massive device hummed ominously, crackling with barely contained energy. Elite Vortex warriors stood ready, led by a towering figure, Vax, the Vortex commander. "Destroy them!" Vax roared. The chamber erupted in chaos. Jacob and his team fought back-to-back with Wagner warriors, energy blasts and brutal melee attacks filling the air. Xander engaged Vax directly, the two titans trading earth-shaking blows. Jacob fought his way to the weapon's control panel, frantically trying to shut it down, but the security was impenetrable. "We can't deactivate it," he shouted. "We need to destroy the whole thing." Jacob pulled out a high-yield explosive charge. "I'll set this inside the core. It'll take out the weapon and half the mountain with it." "But you'll never escape the blast," Xander yelled, still grappling with Vax. "It's the only way," Jacob said grimly, arming the device. Suddenly Xaylan appeared beside him. "I can't let you do that, Jacob." Before Jacob could react, Xaylan's form rippled and shifted, revealing his true vortex nature. He lashed out, knocking Jacob to the ground. "Did you really think we'd let a few humans and muscle-bound oafs stop us?" Xaylan sneered, advancing on Jacob. They fought viciously, trading blows as Jacob desperately tried to reach the explosive. Xaylan's shape-shifting abilities made him a nightmare opponent, his limbs stretching and warping to strike from impossible angles. Just as Xaylan pinned Jacob down, a massive grey form slammed into the vortex infiltrator. Xander had finally bested Vax, and now turned his fury on Xaylan. "Finish the mission," Xander roared, grappling with the shapeshifter. Jacob scrambled for the explosive, his fingers closing around the detonator. He dove into the superweapon's core, slamming the charge into place and hitting the trigger. "Run!" Jacob screamed, sprinting for the exit. The mountain shook as the charge detonated. Jacob and Xander barely made it clear before the entire complex imploded, taking the vortex superweapon with it. As the dust settled, Jacob surveyed the smoking crater. "We did it," he breathed. Xander nodded grimly. "This battle is won, but the war against the vortex is not nearly finished." Jacob's teeth gritted with willpower. "Then we take the fight to them. Wherever they're hiding in the galaxy, we'll root them out." He turned to the assembled human and Wagner forces. "Who's with me?" A deafening cheer was his answer. The next phase of their campaign was just beginning. The smoke cleared from the ruins of the Vortex base on Zelos, revealing the scale of their victory. Jacob stood with Xander, surveying the aftermath. The joy of their success was tempered by the knowledge that their fight was just getting started. "We've dealt them a serious blow," Jacob said, "but the Vortex are still out there." Xander nodded. "We must strike while they're reeling." In the days that followed, Jacob and his team interrogated captured Vortex soldiers. One finally broke under questioning, revealing crucial information. "There's a shipyard," the prisoner gasped. "In the Cygnus system, they're building a fleet there to conquer more worlds." They assembled a strike team of their best operatives, a mix of humans and Vogniers. As they prepared to embark, Jacob addressed the group. "This mission is critical," he said. "We cripple that shipyard, we cripple the Vortex war machine." Their stealth ship slipped through the void, approaching a massive space station orbiting a swirling gas giant. Jacob's breath caught at the sight of partially constructed warships floating in dry docks around the station. "We're in position," the pilot whispered. Jacob nodded. "Activate stealth systems and dock with the auxiliary airlock." They moved silently through the station's corridors, their footsteps muffled by sound-dampening technology. At a junction, Jacob turned to the team. "Xander, take your group and plant the charges. We'll hit the computer core." The teams split up. Jacob led his squad through a maze of passageways guided by stolen schematics. They reached a sealed door marked Central Processing. "This is it," Jacob said as Zero, you're up. A human tech specialist stepped forward, attaching a device to the access panel. Numbers scrolled across its screen as it cycled through security codes. The door hissed open. They rushed inside only to find themselves face to face with a wall of swirling code and pulsing energy fields. "Shit," Zira muttered. "The AI defenses are more advanced than we thought." Jacob watched as she worked furiously at a console, her fingers flying over holographic keys. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she fought to breach the Vortex systems. Meanwhile, Xander's team moved through the bowels of the station. They planted explosive charges on key structural points and weapons emplacements. As Xander set the final charge, a voice rang out behind him. "Step away from that, traitor." He spun to see one of his own Wognier warriors pointing a weapon at him. The soldier's form rippled, revealing its true Vortex nature. "You've led us right to you," the infiltrator snarled. Xander roared and charged. The infiltrator's weapon discharged, catching two Wognier soldiers in the chest. They fell, lifeless. Xander's massive fist connected with the shapeshifter's jaw, sending it flying. More Vortex poured into the chamber. Xander and his remaining team fought furiously, but they were outnumbered. In the computer core, alarms blared. Jacob spun to see a contingent of Vortex cyber soldiers pouring through the door, led by a towering figure that shifted and warped as it moved. Energy blasts filled the air as Jacob's team took cover behind computer banks. The shapeshifter commander advanced, its form twisting into a mass of bladed tentacles. Jacob's mind raced. He saw Zira still working at the console, her face pale with concentration. An idea struck him. He reached into his pack, pulling out a data drive. "Use this," he told her. "It's a virus designed to overload Vortex systems." Zira nodded, plugging in the drive. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the swirling code walls flickered and died. "We're in," Zira exclaimed. "Downloading intel now." The shapeshifter commander screamed in rage, lashing out with its tentacles. Jacob ducked and fired, his shots passing harmlessly through the creature's ever-changing form. "Got it," Zira shouted. Jacob keyed his comm. "Xander, detonate now." The station rocked as explosions tore through its superstructure. Fires erupted in the docking bays, consuming half-built warships. They fought their way back through the station's corridors, now filled with panicked Vortex soldiers. As they neared the extraction point, Jacob's comm crackled. "Jacob, we're pinned down," Xander's voice came through, strained. "Too many of them." Jacob hesitated for only a second. Change of plans, he told his team. We're going after Xander. They charged through the burning station, following Xander's signal. They found his team trapped in a dead-end corridor, exchanging fire with a horde of Vortex troops. Jacob and his squad opened fire from behind, catching the Vortex in a devastating crossfire. As the last enemy fell, the shapeshifter commander burst through a wall, howling with fury. Jacob and Xander stood side by side, facing the monstrous creature. It attacked in a whirlwind of slashing limbs and gnashing teeth. They fought as one, covering each other's blind spots, striking in tandem. Finally, Jacob saw an opening. He fired, his shot piercing the creature's ever-shifting core. It let out an unearthly shriek and collapsed. "Let's go home," Jacob said, clasping Xander's massive hand. They raced for the extraction point, as the station tore itself apart around them. Their ship detached just as a massive explosion consumed the shipyard. As they sped away, Jacob looked at the faces of his team. Many were missing. The cost had been high, but they had struck a critical blow against the Vortex. He turned his gaze to the stars beyond the view screen. Somewhere out there on a distant world, the Vortex were planning their next move. Jacob knew the hardest battles still lay ahead, but for now, they had won. And that was enough. Jacob pored over the data scrolling across his holographic display, his eyes widening as he deciphered the coordinates. Xander leaned in, his massive frame casting a shadow over the glowing map. "Then we strike now while they're still reeling from our attack on their shipyard." Days later, their stealth ship sliced through the inky void of unexplored space. Jacob stood on the bridge, watching as a harsh, rust-colored world grew larger in the view screen. "Sensors detect a toxic atmosphere," the pilot reported. "Oxygen content near zero." "Prep the enviro suits," Jacob ordered. He turned to his assembled strike team. "This is it. We get in, we take out their leader, we end this war." Zaylen stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. "I know their defenses. I can guide us through." Jacob hesitated, studying the former rebel. Could they trust him? But they needed every advantage they could get. "All right," Jacob said. "You're with us." Their ship touched down on a desolate plain of jagged rock. As they disembarked, the wind howled, whipping caustic dust against their sealed suits. They trekked across the barren landscape, following Zaylen's lead. Suddenly he held up a hand. "There!" In the distance, a shimmering dome rose from the rocky terrain, the Vortex capital. Jacob scanned the area, his practiced eye picking out details. "There," he pointed to a fissure in the rock. "Underground access. The generator has to be down there." They descended into darkness, activating helmet lights. The tunnels twisted and branched, a maze of shadowy passages. A distant screech echoed through the caverns. Jacob raised a fist, halting the team. "We're not alone down here." They pressed on, weapons at the ready. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with a nightmarish creature, part machine, part writhing flesh. It lunged at them with razor-sharp appendages. Energy weapons flared as they opened fire. The monstrosity shrieked and thrashed, its wounds sealing shut even as they inflicted them. They retreated, the creature in hot pursuit. Xander spun, hurling a plasma grenade. The blast shook the tunnel, bringing down an avalanche of rock that crushed the abomination. "What the hell was that thing?" a human soldier gasped. "Vortex bioweapon," Zaylen spat. "They're just getting started." They fought their way deeper, facing waves of Vortex defenders. Shapeshifters emerged from the very walls, their forms twisting into living weapons. In a cavernous chamber they found their goal, a massive generator crackling with energy. As they moved to plant charges, a booming voice echoed through the cave. "Leaving so soon?" A towering Vortex commander stepped from the shadows, its body rippling with barely contained power. Xander roared a challenge, charging forward. The two titans collided in a fury of blows. The Wagner's fists cracked against shape-shifting armor as the Vortex lashed out with bladed limbs. Jacob's team worked frantically, dodging energy blasts from the commander's escort. With a final push, they armed the explosives. "Xander, we have to go," Jacob shouted. The Vognir warrior delivered a crushing blow to his opponent's head, staggering the commander. But as Xander turned to retreat, the vortex struck. A crystalline blade plunged into Xander's side. Jacob and Zaylen rushed forward, dragging their wounded comrade as the charges counted down. They barely made it clear before the generator exploded, collapsing the cavern behind them. They emerged to find the force field flickering and dying. The way to the vortex capital lay open. "We did it," Jacob said, helping Xander to his feet. The Vognir's face was etched with pain, green blood seeping from his wound. "I'll live," Xander growled. "Let's finish this." They entered the alien city, its twisting architecture defying human logic. An eerie silence greeted them. "I don't like this," Jacob muttered. "Where are the defenses?" A low chuckle filled the air. Reality seemed to warp around them as a figure materialized, a being of swirling energy and constantly shifting form. "Welcome, Jacob," the creature said, its voice resonating with ancient power. "I am Vilrax. We've been expecting you." Before Jacob could react, Zaylen struck. The rebel's arm elongated, wrapping around Jacob's throat and pinning his arms. Jacob struggled against Zaylen's grasp, shock and betrayal etched on his face. "Why?" he choked out. Zaylen's features rippled, revealing his true vortex nature. "I've guided your every move, you fool. You've led us right to the heart of your pathetic rebellion." Vilrax glided forward, his form pulsing with malevolent glee. "Now, Jacob, you will tell us everything, and then you will watch as we crush your allies and claim this galaxy as our own." Vortex soldiers swarmed from every direction, separating Jacob from his team. As they dragged him away, he locked eyes with Xander. The Vognir nodded grimly, a silent promise passing between them. Jacob was thrown into a cold, dark cell deep within the vortex citadel. As the door slammed shut, he heard Vilrax's voice echo through the corridors. Jacob's world was pain. He hung suspended in a crackling energy field, every nerve ending ablaze. Vilrax loomed before him, the shapeshifter's form rippling with barely contained malice. "Tell us the location of your rebel base," Vilrax hissed, his voice grating against Jacob's ears. Vilrax's appendage lashed out, striking Jacob across the face. The human's head snapped back, but he refused to cry out. "Your resistance is futile," Vilrax snarled. "We will break you." Jacob closed his eyes, retreating into his mind. He focused on the faces of his comrades, on the worlds they fought to protect. No matter what horrors the vortex inflicted, he would not betray them. Miles away, Xander crouched in the shadow of a twisted rock formation. His team huddled around him, their faces grim beneath their environment suits. "The intel checks out," a human operative whispered, gesturing to a holographic display. "There's a network of tunnels leading right into the Citadel's underbelly." Xander nodded, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "Then we move now for Jacob." They slipped into the tunnels, the acrid air burning their lungs even through filtration systems. As they pressed deeper, the walls pulsed with an eerie, organic light. Suddenly a shriek echoed through the passageway. A creature burst from the shadows, all fangs and flailing tentacles. Xander's fist connected with its skull, crushing it against the wall. More monstrosities swarmed towards them. Energy weapons flared as Xander's team fought for their lives, the tunnel filled with the stench of burnt flesh and ozone. "We're running out of time," Xander growled, green blood oozing from a gash on his arm. He keyed his comm. "Sarah, you're up. We'll draw their fire." Sarah nodded to her small strike team. As Xander led a charge towards the Citadel's main entrance, Sarah and her operatives slipped into a narrow side passage. They encountered their first security checkpoint, a shimmering energy barrier guarded by automated turrets. Sarah's fingers flew over her hollow interface, bypassing firewalls and overriding protocols. "Cell block ahead," Sarah whispered, consulting her scanner. "Heavy resistance expected." They rounded a corner and came face to face with a vortex sentry. Its form rippled, hardening into razor-sharp spikes. Sarah ducked under its initial strike. her vibroblade slicing through its midsection. The creature howled, its two halves still trying to reform and attack. A well-placed plasma burst reduced it to ash. Sarah nodded to her team and they pressed on. They found Jacob's cell, the door sealed with complex biolocks. Sarah worked feverishly to bypass them as her team held off waves of vortex reinforcements. The door hissed open. Jacob hung limply in his restraints, his body a mass of cuts and burns. Sarah cut him down, supporting his weight. "Let's get you out of here, sir." They fought their way back through the citadel's twisting corridors. Jacob stumbled, barely conscious. Vortex soldiers poured in from every direction. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, Xander's voice boomed over the comm. "We've breached the main gate. All units, converge on extraction point Alpha." Sarah's team burst out of the citadel, carrying Jacob between them. Xander's forces provided withering cover fire, buying them precious seconds to reach their waiting dropship. As they lifted off, the sky filled with vortex warships. Vilrax's enraged roar echoed across the comm channels. Human and Wagnir vessels swooped in, engaging the vortex fleet in a desperate battle. Explosions lit up the atmosphere as Jacob's extraction craft punched through the blockade. Jacob's eyes fluttered open as they escaped the planet's gravity well. He saw the perseverance on the faces of his rescuers, felt the rumble of engines pushing them to safety. Days later, Jacob awoke in a sterile medical bay. His body ached, but the haze of constant pain had lifted. A familiar figure sat by his bedside, Xander, his craggy features etched with concern. "Welcome back," the Wagnir rumbled. Jacob tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "Zaylen?" he asked. Xander's eyes hardened. "Captured. We're squeezing him for every scrap of intel on Vilrax's operations." Jacob nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Good. We'll need everything we can get for what comes next." Xander leaned forward, sensing the steel in Jacob's voice. "What did you have in mind?" Jacob's eyes blazed with newfound purpose. "We take the fight back to them. We end this once and for all." Jacob gritted his teeth as he pored over the holographic display, his fingers tracing the intricate map of Vilrax's defenses. The intelligence extracted from Zaylen had been a gold mine, revealing a critical weakness in the Vortex's seemingly impenetrable fortress. Sarah leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "A backdoor seems too good to be true." Jacob nodded grimly. "It is, but it's also our best shot." He outlined his plan to the assembled war council. Xander's massive frame dominated one side of the room, his scarred face set in a fierce scowl. "Thy two-pronged attack," Jacob explained. "Xander, you'll lead the frontal assault, hit them hard, draw their forces to the main gates." The Wagnir warrior's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "My warriors thirst for vortex blood. We will not fail you." Jacob turned to Sarah. "While they're occupied, we slip in through the back, a small team, quick and quiet." Sarah's lips curved into a predatory smile. "Just my style." As the council dispersed, Jacob caught Xander's arm. "This is it, old friend, no room for error." Xander clasped Jacob's shoulder, his grip like iron. "We end this today." Hours later, Jacob crouched in the shadow of a twisted rock formation, watching as Xander's forces unleashed hell upon the Vortex capital. The sky lit up with explosions, the air filled with the screech of energy weapons and the thunder of heavy ordnance. Jacob keyed his comm. "That's our cue, move out." His infiltration team slipped through the chaos, their stealth suits blending seamlessly with the harsh terrain. They navigated a treacherous path through the planet's hostile wilderness, every step fraught with danger. A piercing shriek split the air. Jacob spun, his weapon raised, as a nightmarish creature burst from the underbrush. All teeth and claws, it lunged for the nearest soldier. They pressed on, dodging vortex patrols and more of the planet's deadly fauna. Finally, they reached their objective, a hidden entrance, nearly invisible amidst the jagged rock face. Deep beneath the vortex capital, they discovered an ancient network of tunnels, the walls pulsing with an eerie organic light. The air grew thick and acrid, burning their lungs even through their filtration systems. A low gurgle echoed through the passageway. Jacob raised a fist, halting the team. From the shadows emerged a monstrosity, a writhing mass of tentacles and razor-sharp appendages. The creature lashed out, its limbs elongating impossibly. A soldier screamed as he was impaled, his body dissolving before their eyes. Jacob's team opened fire, energy weapons flaring in the darkness. The monster shrieked, its wounds sealing shut even as they inflicted them. Sarah lobbed a plasma grenade, the explosion temporarily blinding them. When the smoke cleared, the creature lay in pieces, still twitching. "Keep moving," Jacob ordered, his voice tight. "There'll be more where that came from." They fought their way through a gauntlet of horrors, each more twisted than the last. By the time they reached the Citadel's lower levels, their numbers had been cut in half. "We're inside," Jacob replied. "Just hold on a little longer." They crept through the Citadel's winding corridors, avoiding vortex patrols with hair's-breadth precision. Jacob's heart pounded as they neared Vilrax's inner sanctum. Suddenly alarms blared. "Intruder alert," a disembodied voice droned. "All units converge on Sector 7. "Run!" Jacob shouted. They sprinted through the twisting passageways, vortex hunter-killer squads hot on their heels. Energy blasts sizzled past their heads as they ducked and weaved. At last they burst into a massive chamber. Biomechanical structures pulsed with alien energies, feeding into a central life support system. A slow clap echoed through the chamber. Jacob spun, his blood running cold as a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. Vortex elite guards materialized around them, weapons trained on Jacob's team. A vicious firefight erupted, the air filled with deadly energy blasts. Sarah cried out, a blast catching her in the side. She crumpled to the ground, blood seeping through her fingers. "Sarah!" Jacob shouted. He turned to his remaining soldiers. "Get her out of here!" As they dragged Sarah to safety, Jacob faced Zaylen. The traitor's body twisted and warped, growing into a monstrous form of writhing tentacles and razor-sharp blades. "It ends here, human," Zaylen hissed. Jacob raised his fists, cold fury etched on his face. "Bring it on." The two collided in a fury of blows. Jacob's combat training pitted against Zaylen's inhuman abilities. They traded punches and slashes, neither giving ground. Zaylen's bladed limbs sliced across Jacob's chest, drawing blood. Jacob retaliated with a vicious uppercut that snapped Zaylen's head back. The chamber shook with the force of distant explosions. Through his comm, Jacob heard the tide of battle turning outside. Human reinforcements had arrived, bolstering Xander's faltering forces. With renewed vigor, Jacob pressed his attack. He dodged Zaylen's wild swings, looking for an opening. There, a gap in the shapeshifter's defenses. "This isn't over," Zaylen gurgled, his body collapsing into a puddle of writhing biomass. Jacob stood over his fallen foe, chest heaving. He turned his gaze to the inner chamber, where Vilrax awaited. Ignoring the pain of his wounds, Jacob pressed forward. The final confrontation with Vilrax lay ahead, and the fate of the stars hung in the balance. Jacob stepped into Vilrax's inner sanctum, his boots echoing on the cold metal floor. The chamber pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy. At its center stood Vilrax, his frail form belying the malevolent power that radiated from him. "So the human arrives at last," Vilrax's voice slithered into Jacob's mind. Jacob raised his weapon, but found his muscles frozen. Vilrax's eyes glowed with psionic energy. Suddenly Jacob's vision warped. The chamber dissolved, replaced by a hellish landscape of writhing flesh and screaming mouths. Jacob's breath caught in his throat as he fought against the nightmarish illusion. "Your mind is an open book to me, human," Vilrax hissed. Outside the chamber, Sarah lay bleeding, her skin pale and clammy. The remaining soldiers dragged her towards the exit, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. "We need to get her to medbay now," one soldier shouted, returning fire. Across the citadel, Xander's massive form charged through vortex defenses. His warhammer crushed alien skulls as he bellowed, "For humanity! For the Wagnir! Push forward!" Human reinforcements poured in behind him, their weapons blazing. The tide of battle shifted, vortex forces falling back under the relentless assault. In the sanctum, Jacob's eyes locked onto a pulsing orb of energy behind Vilrax. Understanding dawned, the source of the vortex leader's power. Jacob focused his will, pushing back against Vilrax's mental assault. With a primal yell, he lunged forward, severing the connection between Vilrax and the energy nexus. Vilrax shrieked as his psionic grip faltered. Jacob wasted no time, launching into a ferocious attack. His fists connected with Vilrax's jaw, but the vortex leader's form shifted, becoming liquid-like. Tentacles lashed out, wrapping around Jacob's throat. Jacob gasped for air, his vision darkening. He slammed his elbow into Vilrax's midsection, feeling ribs crack. But Vilrax's body reformed instantly, the damage undone. The battle raged on, neither combatant gaining the upper hand. Jacob's combat training clashed against Vilrax's inhuman abilities. Blood and sweat mingled on the chamber floor. Suddenly Vilrax's eyes gleamed with cruel triumph. "Your precious Sarah," he sneered. "Even now my virus courses through her veins. Surrender, or watch her liquefy from within." Jacob froze, his heart pounding. In that moment of hesitation, Vilrax struck. A wave of psionic energy slammed into Jacob, driving him to his knees. Pain exploded behind his eyes as Vilrax tore through his mental defenses. Just when all seemed lost, Sarah's voice crackled over Jacob's comm. "Don't give in," she gasped. "I'm overriding the virus. Finish this, Jacob." Jacob heard Sarah's agonized scream, then silence. Grief and rage consumed him. With a roar, he charged at Vilrax, his attacks fueled by raw fury. Vilrax staggered under the onslaught, unable to keep up with Jacob's relentless strikes. Blood sprayed as Jacob's fist connected with Vilrax's face. The vortex leader stumbled, his regenerative abilities failing. Jacob pressed his advantage, raining down blows until Vilrax collapsed, broken and beaten. The chamber doors burst open. Xander and his warriors poured in, surrounding the fallen vortex leader. Vilrax looked up at Jacob, his eyes wide with fear. "Wait," he pleaded. "I'll order my forces to stand down. Grant me exile, and the war ends now." Jacob stared down at his defeated foe, remembering the countless lives lost to vortex aggression. Without a word, he raised his weapon and fired, ending Vilrax's reign once and for all. As Vilrax's body crumpled to the floor, reports flooded in from across the planet. Vortex forces were laying down their arms, surrendering en masse. The war was over. Jacob stood amid the carnage, his body aching, his heart heavy. They had won, but the cost had been immense. Sarah's face flashed before his eyes, along with all those who had given their lives in this long, brutal conflict. As the adrenaline faded, Jacob realized their work was far from done. Remnant vortex forces still lurked in the far reaches of space. The path to true peace would be long and fraught with danger. But for now, in this moment of hard-won victory, Jacob allowed himself to breathe. Jacob exhaled slowly, the weight of victory settling on his shoulders like a leaden shroud. The acrid smell of burnt circuits and alien blood filled his nostrils as he surveyed the ruins of Vilrax's inner sanctum. His muscles ached, his wounds throbbed, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the hollow ache in his chest. "Sir, we've secured the upper levels," a young lieutenant reported, snapping to attention. "But there's something you need to see." Jacob followed the soldier through winding corridors, descending deeper into the bowels of the vortex citadel. The air grew thick and oppressive, carrying an unmistakable stench of decay and chemicals. They emerged into a vast chamber, stretching as far as the eye could see. Row upon row of glowing pods lined the walls, each containing a twisted form barely recognizable as sentient. "By all that's holy," Jacob whispered, his voice hoarse. "There are thousands of them," the lieutenant said, his face pale. "From dozens of species, it looks like they were being turned into some kind of soldiers. Jacob's fists clenched, rage boiling in his veins. Even in death, Vilrax's cruelty knew no bounds. He turned to the gathered troops, his voice cracking with barely contained fury. "Get these people out of here," he ordered. "Anyone who can be saved, get them to medical immediately. The rest," he swallowed hard, "the rest we give them peace." For hours, Jacob worked alongside his soldiers, freeing those they could and ending the suffering of those too far gone. Each pod opened was a fresh horror. Each life extinguished another wound on his soul. As he cradled a young woman, her body twisted beyond recognition, her eyes flickered open. Recognition dawned in those eyes, a fleeting moment of humanity in a form no longer human. "Please," she rasped, a single tear tracing down her deformed cheek. "End it!" With a swift, merciful motion, he severed the tubes keeping her alive. She sagged in his arms, finally at peace. Something broke inside Jacob in that moment. The fire that had driven him through countless battles guttered and died, leaving only ashes and regret. Days blurred together as they catalogued the atrocities, destroyed the vortex's vile machinery, and laid the victims to rest. Jacob moved through it all in a daze, his responses mechanical, his eyes haunted. When the last memorial was erected, Jacob stood before his assembled forces. The speech he'd prepared died on his lips. Instead, he simply said, "We won. But at what cost?" Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving behind the trappings of command and the accolades of a grateful galaxy. He couldn't bear their gratitude, not with the weight of so many lost souls pressing down on him. Jacob found himself on a remote world, far from the space lanes and burgeoning colonies. He built a small cabin with his own hands, each swing of the axe an attempt to drive out the memories that plagued him. But at night in the quiet darkness the nightmares came, twisted faces begged for release. Sarah's voice called out in agony, and always, always the accusing eyes of those he couldn't save. Years passed. Jacob's hair turned grey, then white. His once powerful frame grew lean and weathered. But still he endured, a solitary figure on a forgotten world. Then one day a ship appeared in the sky. A young woman in a crisp Earth Defense Corps uniform stepped out, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and uncertainty. Are you really him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Jacob who defeated the vortex?" Jacob studied her face, seeing echoes of his younger self in her eager expression. For a moment he considered sending her away. But something in her eyes, that unquenchable spirit, that need to understand, gave him pause. "I was," he said finally, his voice rough from disuse. "Come inside, there's a story you need to hear." As they sat by the fire, Jacob began to speak. He told her of triumphs and failures, of comrades lost and worlds saved, but most of all, he spoke of the true cost of war, not measured in credits or territory, but in souls forever scarred. The cadet listened, her expression changing from excitement to horror to grim understanding. And as Jacob's tale unfolded, the legend of the man who defied the vortex took on new depth, a stark reminder that even in victory, the price of conflict can never truly be measured. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.